a ride where you control the action. Sounds pretty fun, right? Well, it may be a bit more dangerous than it sounds, especially if, like, the brakes don't work. You know, I've got a quick case for you while I'm waiting on a fresh pot, one so bizarre that even I had to check to make sure it was real. So strap in and keep your hands and arms inside the ride while we roll in to Action Park.
There's nothing in the world like Action Park.
The park's first and most popular ride was opened in 1976, a full 2 years before Action Park opened its gates proper, and before the name had even been chosen. The Alpine Slide, as it was known, was a pair of 2,700-foot-long concrete and fiberglass slides that riders would travel down in plastic carts. There were no rails, no harnesses, no helmets, just the ride, a slide with a brake that sometimes worked, and a track that was generously described by one park regular as essentially a giant track designed to rip people's skin off that was disguised as a children's ride. That is, if your cart didn't fly off the tracks altogether. With all this considered, it shouldn't be surprising that the Alpine Slide was repeatedly listed as the park's most dangerous ride, even earning a sign with photos of riders who had been injured asking riders to behave safely. And that really set the tone for the park's history. Now, I'm already not one for the outdoors. There's lightning out there, you know. And the deeper I dig into Action Park, the more I feel like staying home is for the best. Once the park opened fully in 1978, the Alpine Slide was joined by the tidal wave pool, oh so charmingly nicknamed the Grave Pool, because despite how normal it may seem, it was actually one of the most dangerous attractions of the park. This wave pool was filled with fresh water, not seawater. Now, on its own, that distinction might not seem like much, but when you consider that the density from added salt makes people more buoyant, and that waves in the pool could reach up to 40 inches, it might not come as a surprise that lifeguards had to rescue up to a reported 30 people a day during weekends, and some 100 people on its opening day. And keeping the theme up, the wave pool was among the park's most popular rides. More attractions were put together with an apparent fast and loose concept of safety regulations. Or to quote former head lifeguard Frank DeBerry, things were done off the cuff. Ride designs just thrown together. They were building the plane while flying it. Action Park would have 3 distinct areas for its resident thrill seekers: Alpine Center, Motor World, and Water World. Alpine Center, of course, included the Alpine Slide that started the park, and added in a bungee jump and a later Gladiator challenge. Hey, show of hands, who remembers American Gladiator? Just me? Okay then. The Gladiator Challenge featured a full obstacle course that concluded with a showdown with a park gladiator, who would face challengers in a one-on-one combat with cushioned bopping sticks. These battles could sometimes get out of hand. Motor World included rides like go-karts and mini-tanks, which fired tennis balls at each other, and took fire from players who fired tennis balls in from the edge of the ring. And, of course, these caused injuries too. After hours, employees discovered that they could increase the speed of the go-karts by plugging the speed limiter devices with tennis balls. There are even stories about employees taking them out for rides on the highway. As for the tank ride, well, if an employee ever had to enter the ring, they would soon find themselves at the mercy of players firing tennis balls at them. And Waterworld. Oh, Waterworld. With rides like the Wave Pool, a Kayak Adventure, and the Tarzan Swing, there was plenty that could go wrong from the very start. The Tarzan Swing in particular saw some eyebrow-raising incidents, with riders swinging in front of the waiting line, leading to a fair amount of showboating and exposure. And that's not even mentioning the most infamous ride. Enter the Cannonball Loop, the world's only loop-de-loop on a water slide. How did that work? Well, it didn't. Not really. But in theory, a rider would enter the 50-foot slide and be pushed by water pressure through a 360-degree loop, come out, and splash into the water below. In reality, riders would often lose speed, smash their faces into the tube, drag along, or get stuck at some point in the loop.
Hello? Anyone? Please help.
Resulting in the park later adding an escape hatch. The Cannonball Loop operated for a month before being closed, though it would operate off and on after that. And this is on top of the fact that teens as young as 14 were operating rides, in violation of New Jersey law.
You violated the law!
And that drinks were readily available with lax opinions on cutoffs and underage drinking. It couldn't get any worse, could it? Now, you might be thinking, this sounds dangerous. But after doing some research, I can assure you it was. 100%. I cannot stress this enough. According to the New Jersey Herald, there were 110 reported injuries over the summer of '85. By '86, that number was up to 330. By '87, a nearby hospital apparently saw between 5 to 10 Action Park guests visiting the ER every day. With reports like that, it might sound like a miracle that anybody made it out alive. And sadly, not everyone did. Over the course of Action Park's years of operations, 6 people lost their lives on the rides. The first was a 19-year-old employee whose cart flew off the Alpine slide and struck his head on a rock. The Tarzan swing claimed a victim due to the shock of icy cold water, and the wave pool saw 3 victims drowning. The last was on the kayak experience, where an attendee flipped his kayak and placed his bare foot against a metal grate that was touched an exposed wire. The resulting shock caused cardiac arrest. While the ride was drained and closed, the park was never fined for the incident. In fact, the park largely avoided fines for most of the time it was open, though it couldn't say the same for lawsuits and insurance fees. In fact, insurance for the park grew so expensive that the owner created a, and I quote, fictitious insurance company in the Cayman Islands. By 1995, the park collapsed under the years of accidents and lawsuits and went bankrupt. But while that might be the end of Action Park, there's a bit more to this story. After shutting its doors, Action Park lived on through its urban legend, even being the subject of a documentary and a Johnny Knoxville film. The park itself was bought out and transformed into a Mountain Creek water park. Today, the park is open with much more attention to safety. These days, I don't think something like Action Park could exist. Not for long, at least. I'm not telling you what to do to get your rush, but personally, I just don't think the possibility of getting injured is the attraction for me. Besides, there's not enough sunscreen in the world to save me out there.